thank you guys so much for having me. Most importantly, for your service, your sacrifice. I know hopefully you all hear that a lot, but I don't think it can ever be said enough how much we appreciate what you do and have done. And it's honestly an honor for me to be speaking to this group, given what you've all done and the fact that many of you have chosen to lead in various ways in your careers. And in my role, I do get this incredible honor of leading the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, and our job is preserve the history of not just baseball, but really baseball as it's grown up with American history. So a lot of really cool stuff going on. I'll maybe give just a few minutes of some of our ties to the military for those of you that aren't aware. It's a truly special place. I know it kind of is on everybody's bucket list, regardless of what level baseball fan you are. And quite often we hear, "Oh, it's a hard thing to get up there." But I'm telling you, every time I talk to people when they go to Cooperstown, they leave having had the most amazing time. And this year, we're giving veterans, patriots, people who really truly care about their country and America's birthday, a whole lot of reasons to come back. So a real quick history lesson sounds too boring, but really this institution that I'm fortunate enough to work in has an incredibly long history of ties to the military, but really none is bigger than the 70 gentlemen who served their country. They played Major League Baseball. They left in the middle of their careers to go off to war and then came back and played. And you know a lot of the names, Bob Feller and Ted Williams and countless others, Yogi Berra, et cetera, et cetera. But it's incredible to think about these heroes who were at the absolute top of their game. I know there's a couple of you in Arizona here. I think I saw one of the chat comments. And just yesterday, I was over at ASU and saw the Pat Tillman statue. And you think about what he did for his country, leaving in the middle of playing football. That's not something that happens anymore. We all know that. And it happened regularly back in World War II and Korea and Vietnam. So in our Hall of Fame, if you've ever been there before, you go into the plaque gallery. If you look below 70 of these plaques that are on the wall, there's a little medallion below it, and that represents the battle that was fought, or what conflicts they served in, what branch they served in, and it's unbelievable. Most days when I walk from my office to the conference room, I'll stop at one of the plaques and kind of catch up on someone's history, and inevitably one of them is one of these heroes who served. Was mentioned, I think, when you were introducing me, the USS Cooperstown, which I have to say, when I took this job about 5 years ago, coming from a public affairs comms role out in Arizona here with the Diamondbacks, and before that in comms and marketing at the Dodgers, I had no idea that I was going to be spending so much time on an LCS combat ship. But I got here and they very quickly said, "You know about this ship that's named after the hull, right?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." They had just recently finished building the USS Cooperstown. And so probably 5 or 6 times I've had the honor of spending time on the ship. We went out there for a number of reasons. The design of the ship, usually I don't think the ship sponsor or namesake gets involved in the design, but they probably don't have a boss like I do. Our chairman of the board here, Jane Forbes Clark, whose grandfather started the Hall of Fame. When we went up to Wisconsin and Michigan, where the ship was docked in the earliest parts of the ship, she said, "We got to find a way to make these sailors understand the people that came before them." And so we actually, she calls it wallpaper, but it's basically, I mean, vinyl clings on the walls that tell the story of the Navy men and women who have served. And I guess in the case of the Hall of Famers, just Navy men. But on every sailor's door, a different sailor who played Major League Baseball is represented. It's really incredible, and it gives the sailors an idea of kind of who their ship is named for. So I was fortunate enough to be there for the design of that. At that same time, our chairman, she suggested that we paint the bat to look like, paint the gun on the ship to look like a baseball bat, and somehow we've pulled that off. So I'll tell you about that in a second. But I went to the mast stepping and the commissioning, and then just recently the change of the command. And man, it's just such a special ship, and wishing all of the sailors on that ship Godspeed. I know it's a lot going on in our world right now, and I have a feeling they are not going to be docked in Florida much longer. But so I mentioned this gun. It's pretty crazy. They named the gun Dottie, as in Dottie Kamenchek, who the character in League of Their Own was named after. And in our collection at the Hall, we have 40,000 some odd artifacts at the Hall of Fame. And one of them is actually a bat from a woman in the All American Girls Professional Baseball League, this Dottie Kamenchek. So we hired a painter, like a set painter for an opera, to go on the boat and actually replicate this artifact in our collection. I wish I was in Cooperstown. I could show you the model that's in my office. But if you Google it, you'll find the bat on the USS Cooperstown looks like this one artifact in our collection. And there are so many incredible things there, including the green light letter that went from President Roosevelt to the baseball commissioner in World War II, when the commissioner was looking for guidance on whether or not to keep playing baseball in the war, and he was told, that would be best for our country to keep going. So many unbelievable artifacts in our collection that tie to either American history, military history, and I could go on forever, but I won't. I'll just tell you it's when you come and see it, it'll blow your mind. And then this year, we are celebrating America 250. Obviously, a lot of people in the country are looking at the semi-quincentennial as an opportunity to celebrate the way our country has grown over 250 years. One of the cool things about baseball is that we've been around almost as long as the country. Maybe not entirely as long, but probably about 30, 40 years after the country was started, people started actually putting bat and ball together and creating baseball games. And so we're going to have a series of things we're doing here in Cooperstown that celebrate American history, celebrate the Declaration of Independence. The biggest one that I want to make sure you all know about, because it's really just, it's so cool. For years and years and years at the Hall of Fame, they did the Hall of Fame game, and they would bring in players. They'd bring in actual teams. Two teams in the middle of the season in July would stop and play an exhibition game for 30 or 40 years in Cooperstown. But it eventually stopped happening for a number of reasons. The main one being they kept getting rained out, and a lot of these players were traveling from wherever they were in the country to Cooperstown and not even playing a game. So we picked up the mantle from that, and we created the Hall of Fame Classic. And for about 10 years, we've been playing a game over Memorial Day weekend that you're seeing come up on the screen there. It's a great look at it. In the past, it's been really there hasn't been a theme to it. There has been just we would call players who have been playing and see if the recently retired guys want to come back and play a game. And this year, the whole thing, you can see the Hall of Famers there that we've locked in. Those are 7 guys, every one of them with a tie to the military, whether they had a parent served. In Raleigh Fingers' case, he was actually a reservist. Every one of these guys, they care deeply about our military. Tony La Russa has a charity that helps regularly with providing pets for veterans. Scott Rowland's father was in the Navy. Joe Torre's brother served. So this game over Memorial Day weekend is our own tribute to service and sacrifice. So not only do you have those Hall of Fame guys coming, but you see a handful of players there who are also all deeply, deeply patriotic. Either they've got family members who served. You'll see one name in the middle there who's a little bit older than the rest, Rick Monday. I'm sure many of you remember it was almost 50 years ago. 50 years ago on April 25th, so we're 2 months shy of the anniversary, that he was playing center field at Dodger Stadium for the Cubs, and 2 guys ran on the field, tried to burn the American flag, and Rick came running in, swooped it up, and saved it from being burnt in front of this whole stadium. That flag has been in Rick's family's possession for 50 years. They've never let it out of their possession, and we're very fortunate that he's loaning it to the Hall of Fame this summer, and we're going to have an exhibit tied to Rick's flag. So he'll be out there. We're getting ready to announce 3 or 4 more players who actually served in the military, more younger guys in their 30s and 40s who either a couple of lieutenants, one in the Navy and one in the Army, a couple guys who played at the Air Force Academy and at the Navy. Really, really special weekend that is going to be all about celebrating those of you who have fought for our freedoms. And you can see there's a handful of things going on. The classic event, we do a clinic for kids. We have an event where night at the ballpark, people who come out, they get a chance to actually meet these Hall of Famers, take pictures with them. And then we do a golf tournament to raise funds for the Hall of Fame, because I'm not sure if you guys know, but most people kind of assume we're part of Major League Baseball. we're actually our own independent entity that is a separate nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving the history of the game. So, on top of all that great stuff, that same weekend, Memorial Day, we're going to unveil a second exhibit that's actually the oldest written known rules of baseball from 1857. This incredible document that's kind of like the Magna Carta of our game. Or the like, Constitution, really, of our game. It's in the original papers from 170 some odd years ago. And then we also have a really amazing trail of artifacts through the museum, and each of the artifacts tie back to one of the ideals espoused in the Declaration of Independence. So it's really just an unbelievable set of events, and one of the things that as communicators and vets and people in your worlds, we're just hoping you guys help us let the veterans know that we're doing this, because I think anybody who comes to this game is going to have an amazing time, but anybody who served, I think there's going to be a feeling of real respect and gratitude. And anybody who actually buys a ticket to the game that's a veteran is getting a free ticket to the museum to go see the Hall of Fame and spend time wandering the halls and seeing all the really special stuff that we have up there. So I realize it's not the easiest place to get to if you're in Arizona, but if you're in Pennsylvania, maybe, as I heard one of you are, frankly, it is worth the trip out. I can promise you, anybody who comes is, I think, is going to have a really special feeling. And I don't want to spend too much time just telling you all this stuff. I'd love to answer any questions you all have, and more than anything, just very grateful for your willingness to hear us and do all that you've done for all of us who have never served ourselves.
Well, Josh, thank you very much. That was a great rundown. I was going to say, I think I saw on the release the Louisville Slugger Group. Is that going to be part of your weekend?
Yes, thank you, Captain. That's a great point. I meant to mention it and forgot. So there is a group called the Louisville Slugger Warriors. It's four guys who are amputees, veterans who suffered injuries in the war and are still in various wars. I think mostly Desert Storm. And they are part of this group that is sponsored by Louisville Slugger, and they play baseball regularly, and they're gonna hang with the big boys. They're gonna play against all of the recently retired players, it just in all the normal positions. And so those guys are coming out, as well as the guy who kind of serves as their coach is a gentleman by the name of Curtis Pride, former major league player who's one of the few deaf major leaguers who's ever yeah, there's a group of the guys. I don't know if those are the guys that are coming, but pretty special. These guys are unbelievable in their baseball skills. Obviously, they can play as better than most of us, better than me at my age, I can tell you. And they're also going to be out on the field alongside the major league players, the Hall of Famers who serve as their coaches. We're still announcing over the next 6 weeks. We're going to be announcing tons of new things that are part of this event, but just truly special weekend in Cooperstown.
Thanks. One other thing I want to mention too is I believe you were in DC back in November at the Navy Memorial, right, for the Bob Feller event. And I was going to have to ask if you had any kind of family connections with the military, or besides your many days at sea, you're probably getting sea pay, I hope, all that time on the Cooperstown. But
Yeah, I've not spent any time actually at sea. Thankfully, we were docked the whole time. But actually, yeah, my father was a reservist during the Vietnam War, and it's funny. He was a journalist by career, by trade, still with us, but now retired. And interestingly, his job when he was in the military, him and two other gentlemen, essentially, I just think they did not want these guys fighting and decided to make them entertainers. And they would do skits. They would go around to different bases and do skits. And one of these guys actually became the creator of MASH and Cheers. One of the three, my dad and this other guy and a third guy. So we like to, as much as I appreciate my father's service and his career as a journalist, the other guys in that group went on to do much greater things. But I an incredibly deep respect for those who have served, and yeah, just truly grateful for
you,
all
you
you do.
mentioned troops. Well, that's amazing that your father and his friends were involved in MASH and all those amazing shows. Because I'm sure there's been baseball episodes in those different kind of military shows. I was going to say, you mentioned doing the skits and so forth. And I'll have to check and see if you guys are connected with the USO, because throughout history, Tommy Lasorda is one of them, and a number of ball players over the years have been very helpful to go and visit our troops through the USO. So I will reach out to the USO headquarters if you guys aren't connected with them yet, and make sure they know about your game as well.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's amazing how often I come. Yesterday, I was at the Royals spring training site, and a couple of their former players, Reggie Sanders and Mike Sweeney, were telling me that they did a USO tour with George Brett and Brett Saberhagen, and I know Randy Johnson here in Arizona, who I worked with for many years. He has done, I think, 10 different tours. He's going on 2 more later this year. So I don't know that we're directly connected to them, but I would take that. And I did not mention when you mentioned the Bob Feller Active Valor Award. That was a really, really special event that happens every year in DC, where they honor various ball players. And in this case, Raleigh Fingers, who, like I said, was a reservist himself. He was honored, and so was Rick Monday. And so it was pretty special. I have never had the chance to be at the actual changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but they put us into a wreath laying ceremony, and man, talk about something powerful. That was one of the most special things I've ever seen in my life. So, just the connections go on between baseball and the military, and I sometimes hate that ball players like to say they go to battle or they go to war. We all know that's not quite what they mean, but you talk to any major league player and they are like, they want to help as soon as we mention anything with the military Memorial Day weekend. Every one of them is like, how can I get involved?
Well, I just had maybe one other question, actually 2 more questions, but I'll let anybody else on the group ask a question. I was going to ask, your event in Memorial Day, is that going to be televised or streamed on YouTube or anything like that for people around the country that can't quite make it to Cooperstown? And having been there, it is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, as well as the Hall of Fame. I mean, just the Finger Lakes area up there is gorgeous. So, is it going to be televised? And my final part of the question before I open it to everybody else is, you're in Arizona doing the Cactus League. Do you get out to the Grapefruit League as well during spring training?
I do. That is one of the best parts of this job, is that right when it starts getting crazy cold in Cooperstown, like it was about 10 days ago, I get to sneak out to both the places. And this year with the World Baseball Classic going on, I'll also they're hosting that in Miami, and I'll get to see a couple games there, a couple games in Puerto Rico, and a couple camps in Florida. But unfortunately, we are not televising the Classic in its entirety. Mainly because the field that we play at, Doubleday Field, is like 110 years old and doesn't really have the proper ability to truly televise. But MLB Network is going to be on site and capturing highlights from it and sharing a lot of that stuff, because it's an incredible story to be told. It just unfortunately doesn't have the camera positions and all the things you need to actually let people be able to see a game being played. Our job is to keep the Hall of Fame relevant for the next generation of fans. I say it over and over and over. I mean, so much of it is really trying to understand the way the next generation of visitors experiences a museum or a entertainment venue. I know that if any of you came to Cooperstown, just for those whose faces I can see, you're of the generation that you would absolutely be blown away by what we see, as would me and all of my friends. But the reality is I have 15-year-old son and 18-year-old daughter, and their life is spent on phones and on touchscreens and on interactives. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to figure out how do you make sure that you're not just turning it into Disneyland, because it's a museum and it's history, and we want them to leave there learning something. But we actually, one of the projects we're doing right now is a huge renovation of the building next door, which is going to become our new museum store. And then the current museum store, we're going to be able to turn into really a interactive gallery that I think kids are going to be blown away with. If any of you have been down to Atlanta, and seen the College Football Hall of Fame, they've added AI now that will boggle your mind. The things that you put a little bit of information into a kiosk when you get there, and I understand you got to be careful with all that. But then you walk around, and the whole experience has changed. Whether you're I went to Indiana University, so home of the national champion football program. But if you went to Indiana versus UCLA versus Florida, your whole experience is different. And I think that the way we're going to keep it relevant is really through technology, through engaging ways that kids can actually walk through here and feel like they understand. It's not just about Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron. They were incredible, and as were the guys in the 70s and 80s and 90s. but constantly adding new artifacts and telling stories about Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout like we do. Those are all important ways that we keep trying to keep it relevant.
Thank you very much for a great presentation, Josh. A question over to your Road to Cooperstown podcast in collaboration with SiriusXM. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's about 2 years in. So we've had about 40 different Hall of Famers sit down with us for about an hour and go over their baseball lives and careers. But I mean, you can get an interview with just about any Hall of Famer. You can search YouTube or search the internet and find a lot of stories where they talk about what went on the field. What I love about the road to Cooperstown is it's twofold. It's really about their road to Cooperstown. And so our host, John Paul Morosi, who does an amazing job, he often gets into the deepest, darkest times of their lives. When did you feel like you wanted to quit baseball? When were you at the lowest point? How did you get past that and get yourself to the absolute pinnacle of the game in Cooperstown? And then kind of the second part of Road to Cooperstown is about the fan journey to Cooperstown. And so every single time we do an episode, you hear from a fan who talks about, I was there in 2007 for Cal Ripken's induction, and this was my memory. And I went with my father, I went with my sister, my mom, and I'll tell you, this place connects generations unlike any place on the planet. You walk around every day and you see these people with their parents and their kids, and it's just such a special place to go to work every day. And so you can, the first 40 episodes are on anywhere, if any, you get any podcast apps, or you can get it on SiriusXM if you have that. But if you don't, just go to your podcast app on your phone and look up Road to Cooperstown. And if you have a favorite Hall of Famer, there's a decent chance that that we've got about half of the guys done, and we've got another season kicking off pretty soon. Thank you all for all you've done and for letting me speak a little bit. And I also thank you because this might be the first time I've ever spoken and nobody asked me about Pete Rose or Barry Bonds. So I appreciate you all and I wish you all luck, and thank you again. Hope to see you all in Cooperstown.
Josh Rawitch, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on this Thursday, February 19th, 2026 at our MOA Public Affairs and Communication Professional Virtual Chapter. We're honored.